My name is Shaheed Kasaka and this is my evaluation for my A2 project. It uses typical conventions of a documentary, like having a constructed narrative, interviews within the documentary, uses of different locations, different opinions within the documentary, and multiple narrative structure, and also the use of music. I delivered my documentary by not having a voiceover. This is to allow the audience to have their own interpretation of what's going on within the documentary. I didn't really want them to know what was happening, so they had their own opinions and made their own interpretations. My documentary does not really challenge any conventions of real documentary filmmaking. I decided to follow the conventions of a normal documentary because I felt that this was the most effective method of communicating the issue of young people in football. I followed the genre's conventions, the genre being documentary. I looked at John Fisk's genre theory, which says genre is a way of categorizing texts, a way of defining codes and conventions for a category of text, and a way of setting up an audience expectations. From the start of my documentary, I make it clear what genre it belongs in by introducing the characters in interview form. I chose to do this topic because me personally, I struggled to balance my school life with my football life, and I know I wasn't the only young aspiring football player to face this problem. I thought it would be a good way of communicating to other players and their teachers or parents, making them aware of how it affects players that are trying to become professional football players, and ways they could deal with the problem, whether that be at home, in school. My topic can be linked to Marxism and Althusser's theory of ideological state, and as the educational system is controlling young people, I say this because in Althusser's theory it says religion, education, family, legal and political systems and cultural and communication systems position an audience in such a way that they believe that these ideologies are correct. In this case, young aspiring footballers have their confidence knocked by parents, even teachers, by them giving them negative comments like, "Oh, you'll never make it," or "School's the only way out," and it's like it starts to make these young players believe what they're telling them is true, and they lose hope in making it, or they even disregard the fact of how talented they are because of education and only focus on education. The effectiveness of my main product and ancillaries is quite effective, as I think this because they link to one another throughout. The double page spread links to the documentary links to the radio ad, and this is done through the use of natural colours and realism of my product. And the characters, I make sure they wear football kits when being being interviewed, so that it's clear it's a football documentary. And in the double page spread, the pictures for it, they're wearing football kits and are around a football environment, which is a football cage. And the use of props is used throughout. Cones, like when Nigel is captured training by himself, the use of cones in football is also seen in the pictures for the double page spread, and some other scenes in the documentary. The use of same characters as at the beginning of my radio ad. I had a snippet of Vance's voice of when he's talking in his interview, and I put it at the beginning like a little teaser of what will be said in the documentary, and then the radio ad continues on. Across all three of my products, I try to represent young aspiring footballers and some teachers. This is done by having young aspiring footballers in the documentary, making them wear football kits when being interviewed, and the teacher was represented as a teacher because he was in a classroom environment, like when he was interviewed, and he shared his views as a teacher as well as someone who's experienced what it was like to be a footballer. And it was also made clear why he was in a PE teacher, as he was in tracksuit and sports gear, so it could be linked he's a teacher, but his attire was of someone who participates in sports, so the link was there. With my project, I was trying to target young aspiring footballers, teachers, parents, football fans, or people who take interest in football. They were targeted by using the characters' stories so that the audience can sympathise with them and take their side. This might be more of a niche audience more than a mass audience. This is because football fans, of people who take interest in football, are usually more dedicated, and can enable the niche publication to continue. My target audience will fit in the demographic group of B, C1 and C2 and E. This is because group B is teachers, senior managers and some middle management. Group C, 1 and 2 are made up of white collar and blue collar, like junior management, bank clerks, nurses, electricians and plumbers or carpenters. These groups are targeted because they could be parents of aspiring footballers or fans of football or people who participate in football or take interest in football, so are more likely to watch the documentary. My target audience was predominantly male because of the results I got from my survey, and which was most replies came from the male gender. I had a few from female, and even the replies I had from females was females who took interest in football. My target audience are not from a particular income bracket, as football can be played by pretty much anyone, and unlike sports like tennis or rugby, which need funding to be played, so probably the working class and anyone from the upper class or middle class is being targeted. From my survey, I discovered that people preferred documentaries that view both sides of the story, so I incorporated the view of a teacher, and as my project is only like a section of the documentary, I couldn't show more views of other teachers, but if it was to go on for longer, I would do that and get their opinions on how young players should handle the pressure of education or when trying to make it as a professional footballer. And they also discovered that people liked interviews and characters to express their views in their documentaries, which I took on board and applied to my product by interviewing characters and making sure they expressed their views and how they really felt about the situation, the issue that I was trying to explore and communicate to my audience. When I was constructing my media products, I used several different forms of technology, varying from use of cameras, both video and photo, editing softwares like Sony Vegas Pro 11 to edit my filmed footage, Photoshop to design my double page spread for my ancillaries, and I also used Sony Vegas Pro to edit my radio advert. For my research, I looked at 4 different short documentaries which I got from YouTube, 3 radio advertisements which were also I got from YouTube, and 2 double page spreads which I just used general internet search, and I found them. I looked for preferably sports related double page spreads that I could use that sort of layout. And when I got the Canon camera, I tested it out by going to different football events, like playing football with my mates or football matches that were on. I took it with me so I can record little bits of footage that maybe I could later on use, but initially it was to test the camera and see if I could use it in sections, like when people are playing football, could it keep up with the tempo of play? Like me using a handheld camera, would it look would the image come out weird, or would it work well? And when I was editing my footage, because I used Sony Vegas Pro 11 before, I had a pretty good understanding of the software and didn't really need to do much more, need to learn much more. So I just used the knowledge I had from last year and applied it to this year's work. With my editing for my double page spread, as it was new to me using Photoshop, I had to use YouTube to watch several different tutorials, and so that I can get a better understanding of the software and know what certain buttons and functions done on the software. I could learn more on Photoshop, whereas I didn't think like my double page spread, like it followed the conventions of a double page spread, but it could be progressed and it could be made better. When I constructed my radio ad, I initially used an iPhone 3G to record the sound, and then I emailed that to myself, then later put it on the USB and then transferred it to Sony Vegas Pro 11. And from Sony Vegas Pro 11 I got a snippet of sound from my documentary and put it at the beginning of my radio ad, and also got my friend who works in, like, who does music, to create me a backing track, which was simply a beat, and then I put all three together, which created the radio ad. And the snippet of the voice from my documentary is put into the radio ad, so people know that something's being advertised. So it's like a teaser, a little taster of what will be said in the documentary.